I have 9 standalones because as much as we like series or we hate series, we also enjoy reading those one and done standalones, and even if sometimes we wish there was more than one. So I picked out 9 standalones that were on my list of books that I wanted to read, and figured I would share some of those with you. For number 1, I have a book that has been on my TBR literally since elementary school, and that is Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. I have been wanting to read this book for so long. I'm pretty sure it's been about 10 years since I first decided I wanted to read this book, and I've just never picked it up. There was always like some other book I wanted to read more at the time, or I just forgot about it, and because when a book has been on your TBR that long, you do tend to forget about it sometimes. The second book has been on my TBR almost as long, and that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. When this book came out, it was so popular among my peers, it was never in the library for me to check out. And at the time, I had a strong aversion to buying books because my money was better served buying Pokemon cards. So, that is what contributed to me never reading this book. And I do really want to read it because everyone talks about how great Neil Gaiman's writing is, and I have yet to read anything by him. For number 3, I have the final book by John Green I have to read, and that is Looking for Alaska. Originally, the first book I read for him was The Fault in Our Stars, and that was for school, and because it had been his most recent book, and I also had Will Grayson, which he wrote with David Levithan, and I read that afterwards, I came up with this idea that I was going to read all of his works backwards. So I read Paper Towns and then An Abundance of Catherines, leaving Looking for Alaska to be the final book I had to read. And I don't think I'll get to it this year, but I'll probably have it done by next year. For number 4, we have a translation because I've read a few translations, but I don't read very many contemporary translations. I know the last one I read was Inkheart. Most of the translations I've read have been classics, so I decided to pick up Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. I read Kafka on the Shore back in college for my world literature course, and I really enjoyed it, so I figured I would start someplace familiar with reading more contemporary translations. Number 5, I have In the Footsteps of the Silver King by Paul Tayar. And I wanted to read this one because Paul Tayar was actually one of my college professors, and I really enjoyed all his classes. He was actually my American literature professor, and we tried to get him to teach his work to us, but as part of the assigned reading, but he just wouldn't go for it. So I really do want to read something by him, and since he focuses more on poetry and short stories, I figured I would start with the longest work I think he's written, which is his novella, which, like I said, is In the Footsteps of the Silver King. Number 6 is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I really didn't have any interest in reading this book until after I saw the movie, and I know a lot of people will be like, oh no! But after a recent kick of reading the book before watching the movie, I realized that I really don't care anymore. Number 7 is Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. I want to read this one because I have an uncle who constantly is on my back about the fact I like reading classics, and I like reading things like Shakespeare and The Count of Monte Cristo and Pride and Prejudice, and basically anytime I pick up any book that could conceivably be assigned in school, he's like, God, I don't know why you like reading that. You should read these instead. And then it's like some book I've never heard of before. And he did admit to me that he's only actually ever read one book in school, and he enjoyed the one book he read. So I want to know what that one book is, just so I can see whether or not, if reading the other classics, he would have enjoyed reading them. That's really my only reason for wanting to read this book.
Probably wouldn't out of spite.
Yeah, it's true.
He gets these one concepts and then holds on to that. You know what I'm talking about?
Number 8 is Poison by Bridget Zinn, and I have this weird thing about not wanting to read contemporary books by authors who have died. And the reason being is that I don't want to fall in love with their work knowing there isn't going to be any more. Like, I don't have this problem with classics because by the time I was born, the writers were already dead. But like writers who have died during my lifetime, I don't want to read what they've written because I don't want to like enjoy it and know it's over and there isn't going to be any more. And I'm trying to overcome this habit. The final standalone I have that I want to read is The Lifeboat by Charlotte Rogan. I originally heard about this on Suddenly Lorna's channel a long time ago, and it is a book about these people who are stranded on a lifeboat, and it's I believe they're telling the story immediately after they have been rescued from the lifeboat, because I really have only read one other story where a person was trapped on a lifeboat, and that would be The Life of Pi.